What's up, guys? This is Brian at Brian's Tech Therapy. Today we'll be looking at the LG C2 versus the Sony X90K. It is OLED versus full array LED. A special thank you to Mr. Robert and Wendy Zahn of Value Electronics for supplying both the C2 and the X90K. Please consider making your next AV purchase through them. Let them know that I sent you. Now, today I want to talk a little bit about the comparisons of these two, and many of you will say, why compare an OLED to an LED? My response is very simple. As I say, why not? Many of you are always choosing value. You're choosing one over the other, and a lot of times that's different technologies. Now, what makes this comparison interesting is they're both considered mid-range, except I don't really feel the C series is the mid-range. The X90K is the intro to their mid-high. There was only the flagship X95 above it. The reason I like to compare them also at 55 versus 65, as you will see the prices pop up and you will see the differences in price. You will see that the X90K is priced reasonably, and as it jumps up in size, it incrementally gets more expensive, where the OLEDs, though they are more affordable than ever, they do jump up quite a bit with each leap from 48 to 55 to 65 to 77. So the real thought in comparing these two is, should you get a larger LED versus a smaller OLED? That's been part of the conversation with LEDs this year, which has been tough for them as OLEDs are more affordable, and that argument goes out the window when they are more expensive than OLEDs. This is why typically comparing a larger LED to a smaller OLED is more of that value over performance conversation, which I find more interesting. We are in a nearly completely dark room, or I should say we are in a completely dark room. We are in the standard preset. The reason I leave it in standard preset and I do the beginning of these videos is this is how they will look out of the box. Both of them will. The reason I also want to show them in this preset is, again, this is what you will see at home. The only thing that has been altered is the warmth of the color. The warmth has been adjusted because all TVs look very cool on camera when they're in a cool preset. Showing you now the presets that we are going into. These are pretty much how they shipped. Again, all we've altered is the temperature. You'll hear a lot of times that OLEDs push blue. Now, the X90, I'm not sure of the zone count, but the X90J, X900H weren't known to have a lot of zones. It's more about the algorithm that handles the blooming and the backlight. The camera's pretty much set here at its normal. The aperture has not been changed. The blooming you see on the right is pretty close to what I see in person. It is a quick adjustment. As you see the explosion, you'll see the backlight react. Special thanks to Jennifer Gala and HDR Super Channel. This is her content. Now, the camera has a hard time catching up even to the OLED at times, so obviously there's no blooming on the OLED, but you can see how it normalizes on the LED and how good the blacks can be. Now, we are also pretty much dead center, using a wider lens to capture them both. As you can see there, as we got into that bloom, or when the explosion, you can see where the backlight struggles. And back to what we were saying earlier, it is the cost of one larger versus one smaller. Do you want more TV for the money, or do you want a better image? We are keeping the same preset until we get a little further into the video. Then we will change it to custom and then filmmaker, more accurate presets. So right now we are still out of the box and standard. Again, what you'll see once you take the display out of the box. There are plenty of channels out there that will calibrate the image for you and make them look exactly the same. Keep in mind, we have different technologies and also different manufacturers. As I mentioned before, the C series has become the midline, where in the past, even though it was still considered the mid, the picture quality was the same on the upper end models that were basically just different aesthetically. The C2 is now considered their mid because the G1 and G2 do have a brighter image or do have a heat sink on the G2. The C2 has quickly become my favorite TV this year, simply because value, performance, does everything well. Gaming, movies, I do feel it is an upgrade over the C1, albeit an incremental one. The C1 was excellent. Now, what I love about comparing the different technologies, there are times where the X90K does not look as bright as the C2. I feel the X90K is brighter than the X90J and obviously the 900H. At times it's a bit too bright, which can be an Achilles heel, as it brightens the entire screen instead of just specular highlights. This is a very challenging demo for LEDs, as you'll see, but it still handles the transitions well. They're not quite as quick as the explosions. Now you'll see you'll see it on the right there with the X90K, instead of just blooming around objects, it'll brighten up the entire side. You'll see it there. It's not just around the object, so in some ways it's not quite as noticeable. Again, very tough demos for LEDs. Obviously, the C2 is completely black, but you are seeing the brighter flames there on the X90K. Now, I'll be repeating this throughout the video. It's more about your value versus size, size versus value. Do you want more TV? When you look at 85-inch TVs costing so much less than the 83-inch OLED, value will always be in the conversation. Now, at the same size, there is very little the X90K can do against the C2, but at the larger size, you'll see the difference in size from 65 to 55 is immense. This is Jennifer Gala's other channel, more cinematic, so we'll be moving into filmmaker mode and custom, disabling most of the processing to give you a more accurate image. The reason why I like using this particular demo is it does have a narrow aspect ratio. That way you can properly view the black bars. You can even see without altering the aperture that there isn't a lot of haloing around the bars. Like last year's X90J, the viewing angle is narrow. We do not have the wide color of, or say the wide viewing angle screen of the X95, J or K, which I like better. I'd rather have the higher contrast ratio than worry about a wider viewing angle. Color does wash out off to the side. As we move around into the settings, the LG C2 is built very well. It is, in my opinion, nearly half as light as the 55-inch CX and C1. It is very, very thin. However, that thin can make it feel a little bit flimsy, where the X90K is more thick, feels a little bit more premium than the X90J, but I wouldn't say it feels super premium or feels very high-end. The jump to the X95K is where you'll feel the big jump. Now here we are off angle. You can see highlighting in the black bars, but that's not bad. Obviously nothing on the OLED. Now, the reason you don't see, for those of you that aren't used to YouTube, you don't see copywritten material here. That's why I thank Jennifer for all of her amazing demo material. Cannot show you movies, cannot show you. It really is not even worth trying. Sometimes it slips by, sometimes it does not. Even pause shots can get hit for copyright. And also, guys, in pause shots at times with LEDs, is not really accurate either. The local dimming will disable when the display is paused, thus creating blooming. Continually showing you the settings. Now you'll see me go through all the different settings. They're not meant to look like for like. We are going between filmmaker, cinema mode, showing you a more accurate image. If you juice up the settings and you're worried about blooming, you will get an image that blooms. Now, for me with LEDs, I do like, or at least with Sony, I do like black adjust. I do like live color, smooth gradation. Reality creation is not something I use often. However, many of you love reality creation on both Sony OLEDs and LEDs. Now, at times with the X90K and a lot of OLED or LEDs like it is that with some of the blooming, what you'll see is almost a hot spot, depending on what's on screen. It doesn't feel like blooming. I've seen that on some cheaper projectors as well. It could be an intricate scene where something in the middle is just hard to figure out. Now remember, with OLEDs, a lot of times we talk about black levels. Many feel like that just delineates the black bars or the edges of things. For me, black bars, or I should say the black level and contrast ratio of OLEDs, it's more in the details of hair, skin, where any shadows live. That black part of the screen, the black level, gives it that grain, gives it the material a consistency that you can't see if it's washed out. Now here we are saturating the colors a little bit more to compete with live color. Changing the color depth, you can alter them. Now the C2 settings are a little less in regards to motion than they were in the C1. Otherwise, I like the C1's interface. They brought back the native auto and, dynamic color that they took away on the C1. Now the challenge for the C2, though I think it's priced affordably, is now running into Samsung S95B, which at the time of this video, I believe is a little bit cheaper at 65 inches. That's a QD-OLED. So it's made this year very interesting on how things are priced. The X95K was very expensive, and where it was kind of criticized was being compared to larger OLEDs and being more expensive. Very hard to compete with an OLED if you're smaller and more expensive. It only really works the other way. It has always been that way. Same with plasma versus LCD. A smaller OLED can hang with a larger LED, not really the other way around. Only because as LEDs get larger, they tend not to lose quality. They tend to still look more beautiful than ever, where LEDs can get, blown out more. I think we can agree the X90K looks excellent. Again, in images like this, it clips a little bit. It is very bright. In these scenes, when I try to drop the aperture too much, it does fade out the other. But seeing a scene like that just passed, the X90K doesn't look as bright. So it's interesting how they trade blows. Even here, the C2 looks brighter. I do feel the C2, it is an EVO panel. It is brighter than last year's C1, as the C1s weren't EVO panels at that smaller size. And even here in the flames, the C2 pops more. The X90K is brighter, but it does wash out a little bit. Again, these are in HDR. I will tell you when they're in SDR. And again, we'll jump in between the settings as we go. Again, special thank you to Value Electronics. It's amazing to let me have these panels for as long as I've needed them. Trying to do them side by side will take up your entire room, and this is only 55 and 65. Now here what we're going to do is we're going to jump back into, I believe we're going to go into standard. Oh no, we're going to, I'm sorry, cinema. But I want to show you the different presets and how they affect each image. We'll jump around, show you game mode, we'll show you standard, show you cinema, cinema pro. Sony still has photo. gaming is at the bottom. I don't know why they have gaming separate, not just separate, but they have photo gaming, then they have IMAX and custom way at the bottom where you have to click out as you see the image changes. I like custom better, either at the top by Vivid or with the other presets versus canceling out or restarting where it blinks, as you just see. Now you'll see in the OLED, obviously the higher contrast ratio, but there is more depth to the image. Now, before the end of the video, I will show you how these panels look in a dimly lit room and then in a very bright room. The C2 is a glossy finish. It is also an OLED, as I've mentioned. The LED has that matte semi-gloss finish, which is supposed to help with reflections. We have a whole separate video on that coming in the next few days, but you'll see how it mitigates that brightness from the windows. I'm not sure it's a better situation. It's something many of you are not fond of. I think it's more in how the image or how the display looks off. It just never looks real clean. But again, going back and forth, there are times where one looks brighter than the other, where back in the day, almost always the LED made the OLED look like it was very dim. We saw that with the X90J last year versus the C1. Actually, no, that was the CX. I apologize. And even though I feel the X90K is brighter than the X90J, the C2, the way they handle the processing kind of keeps it brighter. And you see there with the lobster, a little bit of haloing in the middle. And then here on the Fire, you can see in the, though it's bright, the brightness doesn't help the X90 here. As you can see in the middle of the screen. Now, I've checked the panel over. It is not defective. There are no real hot spots. It all depends on the content. As I mentioned, even paused images of movies can get hit for copyright. Now here, for you guys that love dynamic and vivid, I always do this for you guys, and here is one of the brighter demos running this on dynamic and vivid. After this, we will return it back. Now, if you guys are the first time you're seeing me, thank you so much for watching. I am not a huge stickler for calibration or accuracy. I do like things in the middle. I do like an accurate image. However, I do want to show you how things will be at your home. I am not a scientist. I don't claim to be a calibrator. No desire to be a calibrator. I just want to show you how they will look when you bring them home and the way you'll be setting them up. The way you'll be going through the settings instead of being told how to do it. I'm showing you kind of the way you'll wander around and say, okay, that looks really good in an animated film, or really good in, say, anime, or something that's fully CG. But in films, you'll knock that down to custom or cinema or filmmaker mode. They're both very beautiful. If you like Sony's signature, which is color, every display has its own signature. I do find it ironic that the LG brand and the Sony brand and even Samsung all look very similar in their standard preset, which no one likes. I personally like standard because I think standard's a loud, vibrant preset that you can dumb down and remove the processing. Now here we're going to go into standard juiced. We're going to come out of dynamic. This is standard juiced. What standard juiced mode is for me is black adjust, live color, dynamic contrast is on medium, local dimming is on high. On the C2, dynamic contrast is on medium. It's just a way to show you how they look juiced. Again, not meant to be accurate. The saturation on the C2 is up. After this, we'll return back to cinema and filmmaker. But I always think it's fun to push them hard. You can calibrate these down and make them look very similar. I just don't find that helpful at times. I think it's more helpful, at least in the group that we have here, or whoever's watching, is real tech, real people, real environment. Now, the finish of the X90K doesn't really alter or hurt the image or the contrast ratio. I know with matte finishes, a lot of times we feel like it doesn't yield as clean an image. I feel like when the lights are on, that definitely feels like the case, but in a dark room, it's not something you really notice. Again, it'd be easier to tell that with a matte OLED versus a, you know, the finish on the C2 where it's glossy. Now, lastly, we'll go in here to SDR, which looks beautiful on both. A lot of people feel that OLEDs are very dim in SDR. Didn't have to peak at the brightness, let them run wild on SDR. And they both look very nice. The OLED is dimmer as we expected, but not so dim. Again, you can create the higher OLED light. You can change it. I don't recommend doing that often, but it looks great. Now, always, I want to know what you think in the comments. The X90K will be used for gaming in the next few days. It will also go against the A80J as well as the C2, as that's the panel I have in-house. They will also both go against the C1 at 83 inches. I should be filming the Z9K at 8K at Value Electronics this week, and then the A95K in a few weeks. Now, the motion settings are set to standard in this preset. Again, this is just, you can see the OLED still pushes cool, even though it is a warmer image. That's not how it looks in person. It's just the way they look on camera. But I'm very happy with both. Now, here with our famous LG demo, the aperture is brought down a bit in this one, simply because the transitions are so slow. And it is accurate to what I see. Now, what you'll see here with the blooming that I'll explain more than what you can see. Just because the transitions were so slow, it was creating blooming that wasn't there. As you can see with, I love these, you see around the glass is where you'll see more of the blooming, around the edges on the right on the X90K. It's not really a halo around it, but around the entire scene. But for the most part, very pleased with the X90K as long as you are dead center. Go off a little bit, and in this demo, it's not as evident, but you'll see more blooming. Now, this demo right here, my camera's not really capturing it, but it's where it's not blooming, it's just the whole thing is lifted a bit, if that makes sense. Where the C2 is clearly solid and beautiful. But this was closer to what I see in real life than letting it stay where it was just the camera was catching this haze that wasn't there. It almost does better with faster transitions than these really slow, methodical ones. But you can see the clarity on the C2, not just because it's smaller, it's there. And you can see like the black levels, not just on the edges. I don't know if you can catch that. It just highlights the whole screen versus just around them. Now at the very end here, we're going to transition into the brighter, kind of dimly lit room. Many of you watch in these conditions. And you'll be able to start seeing some of the reflection handling. You'll also see the X90, I'm sorry, looks brighter in these conditions. LEDs tend to be recommended for brighter environments. They do pull away from each other in a brighter environment. Now again, the C2 is glossy. The X90K is the semi-matte, going back into Jen's material here to show you more of a cinematic look. Not full screen. They're both handling the reflections pretty good. Now here, as we get the blinds behind me open, there's also a window to the right of the X90, which is why I'm going to show you more of the C2. Now on the X90, as you can see, the matte finish doesn't make it as clear as the reflections. It kind of softens them. I'm not sure it's better. Where if you look at the C2, it's more of a mirror. Now I'll close that other drape on the right, and that's much better. Now I move over to the C2, you can see that the same reflections are in the C2. It's just like a mirror. But here we're a little bit more in the middle, and I do feel like even the glossy, the semi-gloss, you can still see. There we go, show you one side, and then here. If you look on the C2, the reflection is actually almost clearer. So they are more like a mirror with the glossy finish. But I wouldn't say it's on the level, here, that's better in the middle. I wouldn't say it's on the level of Samsung, which basically just swallows the light. And just showing you the presets that we're still in. I like the X90K. I think it's very good for the money. It is a good value, better than the X90J, where the X90J launched very expensive. The X95 is right there above it. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Take care.